The World Health Organization abandoned plans for the second phase of its investigation into the origins of COVID-19, citing challenges over attempts to conduct crucial studies in China, according to Nature.com. Researchers say they are disappointed that the investigation is not moving forward, but without access to China, there is little that the World Health Organization can do to progress these studies, according to virologist Angela Rasmussen.
Meanwhile, House Republicans are launching their investigation into the origins of COVID-19 by requesting documents and testimony for current and former Biden administration officials. Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee and the subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic sent Dr. Anthony Fauci a letter regarding the idea that the coronavirus leaked accidentally from a Chinese lab, also known as the lab leak origin theory. According to ABC News, Representative Brad Winstrup, chair of the virus subcommittee, said in a statement, quote, "This investigation must begin with where and how this virus came about so that we can attempt to predict, prepare, or prevent it from happening again." Chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, said Republicans will follow the facts and hold U.S. government officials that took part in any sort of cover-up accountable.
So I think it's very regrettable and unfortunate that this investigation by the WHO can't be completed. I totally accept what they're saying, that there is no way to do this investigation without greater Chinese participation. Here's a question. If China is not going to participate in this investigation, if they just, no, sorry, you don't get to ask us questions about this. Why is it just a recommendation from our own government that maybe EcoHealth Alliance not get any more grants to do research in Wuhan? Maybe if they're not going to play ball with this investigation, we just say, sorry, no more dollars to do research in a conditions in a Chinese lab we can't vet. That should go both ways, I would think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I can't imagine there would be some circumstance that makes it so that the only way research that is necessary for the public interest that is completed is if it's happening in this one lab in China or a series of labs in China. So I think that seems very reasonable. And I also take the point that, yeah, if you can't conduct the investigation in China because China isn't supporting the investigation, fine. But the investigation into a U.S. cover-up, I think, is very important because it seems likely that there was a point in time when facts were known, where communications were being passed back and forth about the likelihood, at very least, the credibility of a lab leak theory being the origin of the virus. And a lot of people are going to want to draw inferences one way or another about what it means that the government kind of sat on that explanation for so long, that the media was so complicit in shaming anybody who wanted to investigate lab leak theory for so long. And if we don't end up getting an investigation at the root in China, ultimately all we're left is kind of the negative inferences from how people reacted to the possibility of lab leak theory being validated as a reality.
Yeah, there have to be some consequences for China the Chinese government wanting to be a closed society and not participate in things like this. They just can't have it both ways. They can't, if they're going to make stipulations and say, no, we're not participating in this thing, we have to play a little bit hardball, a little bit better. Say, okay, then you don't get access to X, Y, and Z things that you want from us. Like we have to stop caving.
Yeah, sure.
They don't cave. I mean, they never cave.
Should we spend a little bit more time asking whether or not we think there are ways to investigate? I mean, there are obviously EcoHealth staffers. There are people in China who are certainly present. We all know that we have spy balloons going on everywhere. And
our spy balloons are COVID lab origin tracking balloons.
I mean, should we actually be so quick to accept the premise that it's impossible to investigate origins without China's cooperation?
Maybe we shouldn't. That has the ring of truth, certainly to me. I mean, in the past, people have been critical, some people in the scientific community and others have been critical of the WHO for being too deferential to China. I know that was a criticism lobbed at the WHO at the beginning of the pandemic. I think their stance has changed a little bit, or they've become somewhat more vocally critical, at least in their communications. Their communications were it was like the Chinese Communist Party was writing them. I think that's not the case anymore. But yeah, hard to know. And then it's just always hard to know with who are the investigators, who are the scientific people. Yeah. Do they have investments in research still being conducted? Are they, because the issue we have with asking our own CDC or NIH to look into this stuff is that they seem very, the ideologically in favor of more funding for exactly this kind of research. So then we worry that they're not going to, even if the conclusions were staring them in the face, they'd find ways to avoid them and say, well, it's not clear. Well, who can say for sure? Or, well, this research was not great, but it's not technically, doesn't meet the technical definition of the research we think needs to be done and is still being funded, perhaps in China.
Yeah, I mean, I was also curious. I mean, you would think that China has an investment in understanding what happened here as well to prevent it from happening again. They're certainly in the throes of experiencing what the rest of the world basically experienced over the last 2 years now that they are opening up. And people are dying in scads, and it's a terrible situation that I believe nobody wants to repeat. So again, it's like, what is the hesitation to investigate the origins? Well, it seems, one, there's obviously some pretty significant implications for the lab itself, its ability to continue to do research and get more funding. There's also the question of liability. And if it really is just the case that people's fear of being liable for the untold numbers of deaths and economic shutdowns that resulted from this, then that's a really, it's a tough trade-off.
I mean, this is going to sound harsh, but I think it's absolutely true that the Chinese government would rather let another pandemic happen than take responsibility if they were responsible.
But also they can't, like, who is actually going to hold who exactly liable? Apart from maybe EcoHealth as an institute, like as a,
right.
But, you know, what are
and
they
they're
going to do?
not a Chinese organization.
They're not beholden to what law is going to attach to who exactly that's going to make anybody in China, you know what I mean, China liable. So, you know, if this really is just basically, frankly, about EcoHealth and that people immediately involved protecting themselves, it's a real shame if our ability to prevent an outbreak like this happening again all comes down to people trying to protect themselves financially. And look, this is an argument for liability shields that some people make. They say we never would have gotten vaccines, we never would have gotten people to rush this process if they didn't have the protection of liability waivers. It's a little bit of a catch-22 because you can see in a situation like this, you know, would you rather know what the origin story actually was if it meant that the people who, you know, who admitted to wrongdoing or discovered wrongdoing weren't actually held accountable anyway? My position is we need to and deserve to know the truth regardless of the implications of it. We need to know the truth. This was and you know, we know some of the scientists who are involved are well-known people. They call her the Bat Lady, right? I can't remember exactly what her name is, but her nickname is the Bat Lady because she is known for going into caves and getting specimens and doing research on them. Interviewed? Is she not?
She's a Chinese woman.
I mean, she can still be interviewed. Yeah. I mean, is she not being interviewed in China? Is she not like?
We don't know. Yeah, we have a lot of. We should have some questions for her. There's a lot of questions to ask. Maybe
the Republican House will bring her before their committee.
We have to go. Maybe we need to send a balloon.
Oh, Lord.
That, like it has a claw come down and grabs you, scoops you into the balloon, and takes you back.
All right.
I don't know. It's a very Rick and Morty type device.
Are you allowed to talk about Rick and Morty anymore?
Oh, excuse me.
Canceled.
I will not be silenced. More Rising right after this.